Dr. Rama R. Subramaniam is currently the director of Dayanand Sagar School of Architecture. She graduated from JNTU in 1983, completed her master's in SPA in 1985 and her PhD in 2007. She has published over 40 papers in national journals and over 10 in international journals. She has participated in collaborative research with INTAC and ITIRT with over 28 years of professional experience and over 20 years of teaching experience. She has also received the Best Teacher Award 2009 from Practicing Architects Association, Bangalore. Welcome, ma'am. I kindly invite you onto the stage.
Thank you so much for the warm invite. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to see many familiar faces. I wish to thank Dr. Jagannathan and management of KSSA for inviting me here to interact with all of you. And it's a very interesting topic. It's a very interesting series of topics that KSSA has chosen for this FTP. Something which is not commonly addressed. And it's my pleasure to be here to speak to you on child-friendly housing. I wanted to subtitle it as Creating an Ideal Housing Environment for Families with Children. So basically, my background is in housing, and I've also done some studies in child-focused design. And there are some very basic things. This area of design doesn't suffer from any kind of a cultural differentiation or geographical differentiation, because world over, parents are parents and children are children, and child-friendly has a common meaning all over the world. So this is an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. So basically it means that an entire community of different people interacting with children in order for the child to experience and grow in a safe environment. I think as a proverb, we are also not unfamiliar with this concept. Many of us who grew up in smaller towns know very well that wherever we went, there would be some uncle or auntie who would know our parents, and if we were doing something wrong, would report back to the parents and say, okay, it was here doing this, doing that. So we are quite familiar. Not only in a critical way, but also in an encouraging way. Maybe someone helped us cross the road, someone helped us board the bus, or someone intervened when we had an argument with an auto driver as children. So all these things are part and parcel of this kind of a thought process, that it's not just the parents or the extended family who are responsible for a child, but the entire community has to be watchful and to take care of the child too. Grow up into a fine human being. So this is the UNICEF definition of a child-friendly space. Places designed and operated in a manner where children can be provided with a safe environment, with opportunities for play, recreation, education, health, and psychosocial support. Each of these things has its own role to play. And UNICEF has been very proactive in creating child-friendly spaces, mainly because they intervene in a lot of war-torn areas or strike-driven areas where there is bombing or there is a lack of shelter or maybe there's a natural disaster. So in these areas, UNICEF is very quick in terms of setting up camps and support systems. And they focus on the children, and they set up the kind of camp which is not 100% temporary, like the way many people approach. When you look at a disaster management scenario or something, you think of it as something temporary. But UNICEF, especially because they work with children, and children are dynamic in the sense they are growing every day. They are not static individuals. Therefore, their logic is that whatever you are giving, even in a disaster area, it should be with a sense of not temporariness, but with a sense of permanence. Because permanence is very, very crucial for a child's development. Stability is very crucial for a child's development. So they don't want to give a temporary feeling to any camps they create. And therefore in those camps, this is the mantra they are using, a safe environment with opportunity for play, which is the primary aspect of childhood. Recreation, we may think how play differs from recreation, but recreation may be more supporter driven or maybe more handheld, whereas play is more individual. The child will play on its own, but for recreation we may need some tools or some people to support. And then of course education, health and psychosocial support, because children in disaster areas, they may go into some kind of a shock where they are unable to speak or they undergo depression or anything of the sort. So that is why they want to focus on the stable environment which is provided, and this is the definition provided by UNICEF. So apart from that, in a more common scenario, child-friendly means a lot of space to run around and have fun. I think because childhood is the time when when children want to be free from restrictions, not to be told all the time what to do, what not to do, and generally left to their own devices so that they can absorb from the environment, they can learn from seeing things around them, experiencing, and being in a group. So socialization is learnt in the group. Children, nowadays we do see some parents who disagree with the schooling system. I have come across many people who say all the schools are not at all good enough and therefore I want to homeschool my child. They keep the child at home and they teach them. But the thing is, the child becomes woefully deficient in social skills. So school is also the place where the child is socialized. First of all, very small children are very self-centric. And then as they grow up, they learn that there are people around them with similar feelings. If you push them, they will also fall. And if you pinch them, they will also cry. So they have to learn it by being with others. Then that's how they learn to share, they learn to mingle, they learn to speak in a social way. So all these things come from socialization through schooling. And so schooling is best not avoided. So that is the conclusion many people have come to. And also to have free space, free time and free activity. So these are the things which are essential for children. I think all of us in my age group, maybe in other age groups also, have really seen how our environments have transformed over the last few years or few decades. From the time back when we used to play in common spaces when we were children, I doubt my parents knew where I was going. I would come back from school, dump the bag and simply run out. And they would not be able to trace me till I felt it was time to return home. Though we followed rules and they would say that this is the time, beyond this you should not stay out. And we followed the rules. Why did we follow the rules? Because we were given freedom. And with freedom, as we all know, comes responsibility. So it is not just rules, rules, rules. We were given fair amount of freedom. Therefore, we knew when the rug will be pulled. And we didn't want the rug to be pulled, so we adhere to the rules. So people can only be expected to adhere to rules when they are given the freedom, when they know that this is the limit and beyond which you can't take your freedom forward. So in the playtime, they never queried me on what friends I made, whether I was playing in dangerous places. Actually, the places we played in were quite dangerous, because in those days we would find metal pieces on the ground. Nobody would be having, we didn't have some clean lawns and dusted things to play with. We were exposed to a lot of hazards, but we learned to take care of ourselves and we learned to take care of each other. So if we are swinging, we know beyond a certain speed, person on the swing will fall down. So we knew how to modulate that. We knew the people who can climb trees and the people who can't climb trees. And we also knew, which roads to cross, which roads not to cross. Basically I grew up in an urban environment. And so these kind of things we didn't learn because our parents told us. We learned because we observed our friends. And we observed in the group of friends, there were younger people, older people, it was a mixed age group. And because we were not slotted into activities, everybody played together. And so there was a lot of cross learning, and that was a big benefit. And gradually, as the scenario evolved, we see, I would like to quote an example of my friends in the US, younger people who have small children. The child boards a bus, goes to school, comes back, maybe there is some play in school, okay. When the child comes back, then there has to be a parent to receive the child, and then to take the child. I really am puzzled at the timetable. Monday karate, Tuesday dance, Wednesday guitar, Thursday swimming, Friday something, what else? Yoga. Something like that. There's a day, I mean week-long timetable for the child, and the timetable for the child means timetable for the caregiver, whether it's the mother or the father, who has to take the child in a car and to the class and bring the child back. So the parents' time is also so awfully tied up. So if we quote this to our parents, they will be sort of puzzled. I mean, like, how did they conduct their own lives if they're running around the child so much? So, I mean, what did they do for their own entertainment, their own work, their own economic activity if you're running around the child so much? And the poor child has no choice. So you just have to go to whichever class is slotted for you, and you have to interact with the people over there. Certain classes you may like, certain you may not like. So that is the way, childhood has evolved. And going further, if there is really beyond all this, if there is time to play, then you need a play date. So you fix up, the mother will call up the other mother, or the parent will call up the other parent and fix up the time, and you either go there or they come here. And there is one unscheduled time, that is the time when you can carpool. In case two people are going from the same direction or coming from the same direction, then there is a carpool time, and that is the time the kids get to fight in the back seat, I think. Rest of the time is so structured. So I was just thinking, what is it that the parents want the children to learn, and what is it that they want the child to do? And I had a long conversation with one of the parents who's caught in this scenario, and she said that, of course she works in the US, she said she and her husband take turns in being economically active. He works for a year, she works for a year, because she didn't want to be being equally qualified and all that. She didn't want to be the home person and losing out 4 or 5 years on career. So they struck a deal and they said, I will work for 1 year, you work for 1 year for the next 4 years or 5 years, and then later on we'll see. So that both the CVs will remain active. So it is such a price to pay for lack of safety in cities. So when we talk about safety in cities, we only think about accidents and burglary and things like that. But think of this is something which only the age group which deals with it will realize. And the lack of support systems, going back to this African proverb, because nobody else in the city is bothered about any other child apart from their own child. So there is no kind of a group monitoring, there's nobody I remember when we used to play, there used to be a rickshaw stand. There would be those pull rickshaws. The rickshaw drivers would be waiting for someone to engage them. And if they found us playing in a very rough manner, they would say, "Semi karna beta ge jo," and things like that. I mean, we had nothing to do with the rickshaw driver. Just a very peripheral person whom we would see at the edge of the playground when we went there. So that kind of input is so severely lacking in today's context, so which is why the parents are overstressed, overburdened and everything. So there is a lot of thinking globally that this is not the way we should live, and we should rethink our spaces, and we should come back to more productive forms of development. So what are the basic needs of children? Children need safe, uninhibited outdoor and indoor spaces for their physiological and psychological development. So they need safety, they need freedom, and they need it both indoor and outdoor. And parents need to be able to allow their children outside without constant and close supervision. So I will also refer to a time when we were designing small houses at the beginning of my career. Many of the clients would say, Bangalore setback rules, which say that you need to have the parking space, you need to have a 10 feet setback on one side. And so they would try to say that, can you put the kitchen in such a way that the kitchen window will open onto the gate, so I can monitor the kids going in and out. So you have some kind of a visibility, because some of the plots were facing a little park or maybe an empty plot where the kids would be playing. So you want to see what the kids are doing. So there's a kind of a visual supervision. So this was one kind of a request that many of the clients had. So they would like to supervise, but it was not a very hands-on supervision, and it was something that the parents did by grouping themselves together. Because if the houses are in a lane, and all the parents in the lane will sort of monitor the kids on a group basis. So children need easy, casual access to other children without a formal invitation to play. So basically there should be a space which the child can inhabit, where you go on a daily basis or free time basis, and you find other children there, and you can either be friendly or not friendly, you can observe or you can play or you can participate. And actually, if you observe children at play, there's a lot of politics there also. Some children are popular, some children are marginalized, but it's something that they learn, that some behavior makes you popular, some behavior will not make you popular. There are some children who want to be holding the bat all the time. I think in this short time they will become unpopular. So they will learn to negotiate. So these are all things by role play that they learn and they get socialized. So they should be having access to a space where they can walk in and they can find other children, and they can either choose to play or choose to observe, and it is their own choice. Children need places in the communal environment that are undeniably their territories, where they can expect to find other children. So it should not be a place, like nowadays we see most people playing gully cricket and all. You come to a designated place every Sunday morning or every evening, and you find other people, and whoever is there will form the team, and you get to play. But because of the pressure on urban space, I think nowadays that space may not be always available. Someday it is there, someday it may become a vegetable cart place, someday it may become some other place, or maybe there's a political meeting. So you may not find the place. So that is not very pleasant for the child to play. They need the unfettered space. They cannot be having the space as in, it becomes free for their use. The environment around the homes need to be safe from traffic, pollution, unnecessary physical and social hazard. So we find a lot of care being put into the design of schools, because people are very aware when it comes to a school, which is between a management and the parent is paying a fee. There the parent is very cautious about how they pick the school, whether the safety regulations are followed, whether there is enough space in the classroom. Parents are very picky. But then when it comes to the spaces around their own homes, because you don't have ownership to the common space, you really cannot be picky like that. So parents don't have any control on the play space of the child in the non-school environment. Children should be able to experience the pleasure of finding bugs, picking leaves, smelling flowers. How? There are no plants, no leaves, collecting things and so on without their parents or the management harassing them. So I think nowadays children only see plants and leaves when they are taken on trips to Lalbagh or something like that. So this nature trail trips and all that people do. Otherwise, nature is something which is not seen much by the children on a day-to-day basis. That's because through such contact with nature, they develop an understanding of basic ecological principles. So this brings me to an example, my own background, we come from a rice growing area in Tamil Nadu, and my family has some rice fields, and we grow the rice, we pack it, we do all those things. But unfortunately my sons grew up in Bangalore, and so when my younger son was very small, one day he got a terrible fear. He said, if the rice is over in the house, what shall we do? So I told him, we'll go to the shop and we'll buy more rice. And he said, if it's over in the shop, what shall we do? Then we said, we'll go to the farmer, we'll go outside and we'll eat. And then that was the first time he realized that rice grows in a field and it is harvested, and so we had to make a special trip to our village to show him how rice is grown, because we were afraid why this boy is developing these kind of things so profound. And of course milk comes in packets and cows are something else. So these kind of disconnects, which because of the urban background. children need private spaces for themselves, for example, tree houses and forts, and away from public view. So basically there should be a background monitoring, but they should not be too much in the face. The child should not be seeing the person who's monitoring them too much. They need room for their imagination. So they need to be able to move around their home neighborhood safely and to take little trips farther and farther from home to gain a sense of independence. So all these things which I've been telling you are culled from the research by Cooper and Sarkisian. So what they say is the smallest child makes the smallest trip maybe within the room, then you go to the door, then you go outside the door, then you go outside the gate, then you go to the school, and so on. So as you make larger and larger trips, the child gains in independence. So basically I think a generation back, children were more independent by the age of maybe 6 or 7. But now I think the age has gone up to maybe 9, 10, still have to drop and pick up and all that. So the dependence is increasing because of the lack of safety. Young children relate to the world through their bodies and senses, and they require large amounts of space in which to learn by moving and doing. So basically new parents, they keep on telling the child, be careful, don't climb the step, don't go down, don't do this, don't do that. But actually they should be left free and they should be able to move around and they should learn by falling, which means the space where they fall has to be hazard free. They should be allowed to fall, but it should be a designed sort of a surface and things like that. So there is a lot of research all around the world about child-friendly design. Research indicates that children living in crowded environments can have poor social adjustment. So that is a house which can accommodate 2 children. If you cram 3 or 4 or 5 children, then there's an increase in misbehavior by children living in homes with more than 2.3 residents per room. This is an Australian study. So I think we have far more than 2.3 residents per room. It's not applicable to Indian context, but still there have been studies about crowding of children and the impact on their behavior. So basically this comes back to the fact that all children need a lot of attention. It can be direct or diffuse attention. So when the attention cannot be given when there are more number of children, then the misbehavior or disconnect will increase. So just briefly coming to the principles of child-friendly design, there is an architect's firm called Ferrari and Associates who have done extensive research in Portland, Oregon, about families living in the center city, and they came to the conclusion that the most important housing design priority was having enough interior living space with more space for common areas. So basically this disputes our current urban housing context where we, even in the Indian context, we have moved to living room, dining room, bedroom, kitchen, study, toilets, that kind of a format. So they are saying each of these spaces has a single specific function. Instead of that, you shrink the specific functions and you give more space with a common function or a common area, which can be used multiply in different ways. So this is an infographic by worldvision.ca about what a child-friendly space is. So number 1, emotional support to the child, which is indicated by the teddy bear. Then number 2, informal learning and life lessons. So everything is not taught in school, it has to come as an informal learning. Number 3, nutrition, safe water and hygiene, of course. It's not very contextual here, but I would like to quote that another study has found that in about 40% of rural India, all people suffer from what is called subgrade hepatitis. Because of the lack of good quality potable water, they have hepatitis ongoing, like for many years and years, because they can't access good quality potable water. So it is a part of life. Having subgrade jaundice is a part of life. About 40% of rural India. So then they should be given nutrition, potable water, safe water and hygiene. And of course protection for children who are vulnerable, abused or disabled. And fun activities and creative playtime. And support to parents as primary caregivers, because we are now very partitioned society. So the parents are very stressed and very overburdened, so they should be supported in this caregiving activity. And this is a study from Vancouver which says the design of the unit should provide for a variety of spaces that can accommodate a variety of uses. I think both this, the first finding and the second finding are related. So they don't want designated spaces like bedrooms and kitchens and all, they want multi-use spaces. And a separate living area in group housing to accommodate informal activities such as games, children play, teenagers entertaining, etc. So basically, because we are now more in context of group housing, so they are not advocating only play spaces within the house, but a common play space, indoor play space in the group housing area where games can be played by all the children together. This I don't think we have seen in Indian context. We do see the play lot outside and we see play space inside the house, but in group housing, the common play, that is what they are advocating. So this is just a visual to show child friendly, like traditionally people have said that primary colors, children are used to primary colors and things like that. Now the thinking is coming around to using primary colors, but using simple palettes, not overdoing the color, and keeping color accents, keeping stair-free playing space as a floor, and large open spaces, and not just very constricted spaces which are not useful for children. So basically some highlights of what a successful child-friendly space can be. A social environment where children can interact with their peers using interesting and stimulating props such as toys and art supplies. So you can't really let the child loose in an open space and say just go and play. So they need the tools, they need some things they can play with. And though they do have very extensive imagination, something to support the imagination, some books, some art supplies, something to paint with, draw with, or maybe some toys. So some what are called stimulating props. So actually I think young parents today are very familiar with this word stimulation. I think everybody wants this child which is entering nursery school to be already fit for higher secondary education. They want to teach them so many things, nursery rhymes, this, that, everything. So that again there is a rethink. There was an extensive study in Finland which says children who go to school for about 2.5 days in the week, they learn the most, because what is it, the rest of it is 4.5 days is free time for them to learn on their own. So structured learning of 2.5 days or 3 days is more than enough. So Finland is going that way, that excessive schooling is not really useful. India is of course going the other way. Actually Indian schools are very funny. I am puzzled because the youngest children goes to school first in the morning, youngest child. So the 7 a.m. bus is for the nursery school, 8 a.m. bus is for the middle school, and 9 a.m. bus is for the high school. Now this really, I've had a lot of fights with the school management. Why don't you reverse it? Make the older child go first and make the youngest child go last. But how do you expect? But they say the youngest child will come home by 11 o'clock and the oldest child will remain in school for the long day. Therefore they come late, which I found very puzzling. Because to make the small 3-year-old board a bus at 7 a.m. is really a challenge. So maybe in the Indian system we are more, should I say, learning driven in a structured environment, whereas other countries are looking at other forms of diluting the structured learning and giving more room for the unstructured experiential learning. So there has to be a creative architecture to accommodate different activities for different users, dividing space into activity zones that allow different user groups, including small children, older children, and supervising adults, to pursue differing activities while minimizing conflict. So the playground should be such that the small children can play in a particular place, the older children can play somewhere else, and the supervising adult can either read a book or listen to music and be there without actually getting involved in the politics of the play. Because the children will be fighting and pulling each other's hair, but we can't be involved in that. We are just there to provide a gentle kind of an overview. So the space should accommodate the age groups. So the parameters for design would be largely the age groups of the children who are available in that particular group housing or whatever the environment is. The activities they will involve in, because I think culturally and climatically the activities will differ. So different places may have different activities. In India we sort of segregate early. The girl child gets into different kind of activities fairly early on. Maybe in other cultures they don't segregate so early. So activities related to age groups we need to understand. What the smallest children are doing, what the intermediate children are doing, what the older children are doing. And also we must always remember this is a dynamic data because the child is always growing. And then the climate, because in India maybe we play outside a lot more, and in other places because of the weather it may not be possible in colder climates. In fact, I found in Canada, which has a very strong Indian population, they use big barns, the indoor space, for teenage activities. Because what happens is they can't play football outside, they can't be playing in the, because of the climate condition. So they have also their heated football courts, their heated swimming pools and play spaces, but they also have provided public spaces in indoor where children can just stay together. They have dance groups, they have some other informal activity groups. So spaces for those things are also provided, mainly because of the adverse climate. The primary thing in designing for children is to create a sense of calmness. So it relates to the other word, that is providing stability. Stability and calmness most essential, because children are volatile and they should not be over excited, they should be instead kept calm. So young children now spend most of their waking hours indoors, and how many children of today will experience the wonderful outdoor adventures such as those fondly recalled by their parents? So outdoor activity is reducing, and indoor, school to home, home to school, and holidays you go to all these classes, and they are also indoor. In fact, just recently I was puzzled by a building in JP Nagar which looked like an entire cube. So I kept thinking what that cube could be. And then one day I ran into somebody who was going into the cube whom I knew, and I asked that lady what it was, and she said her young daughter is going there to learn swimming. So basically it's a water tank. On a 40-60 site, someone has built a swimming pool. Can you just imagine if the neighbors complain, because if the water, all the neighbors will be inundated. So they have built an enclosed swimming pool, because that area, I mean, it's a revenue development, not too many regulations. And the crowd, there are more IT people in and around. There was a demand for swimming pools to teach young children. So somebody capitalized on it and built an enclosed swimming pool. So from the outside it just looks like a cube with no windows. But inside it's fairly dangerous, because in a residential area you can't do that. You can't have such a large volume of water which may just create a Kerala-like context if it bursts. But we don't care about the rules, so that's okay. So the indoor environment receives the most attention from educators, children and adults. So as we all know, there is a huge booming interior design market nowadays. Everyone is spending so much on their 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom flats. And I think children room decor has really gone as a high budget input. So you paint on the walls, you paint on the ceiling, you provide customized beds. Everyone is a fan of Fisher-Price toys, safe plastic toys, and so many things are happening. So because we are in control of our interior environment, our own house, we can modulate, but we can't modulate the exteriors. So indoor environment, educators, children and adults are designing and modulating to a large extent. So what would be the things that in design one should look at? One thing is the transition space for moving outdoors and indoors. Because outdoor is still something which is a challenge for a child, in the sense it could be hot, it could be raining, it could suddenly become breezy. So the child would not like to come into the house but have a transition space for shelter for some time and either go back to play or decide to come indoors. So transition spaces between indoors and outdoors. Spaces for small active groups, because like we discussed, children are of different temperaments. Some children may be quiet, some children may be active, some children may be rough and boisterous. So for the group activities, we need segregated spaces. Places that encourage interaction and relationship building. So there are children who play and children who watch, so both things should be possible. Private quiet spaces for talking, thinking and planning, and multi-level areas, wet and dry areas, pathways, all as elements of design. Natural materials such as tree stumps, plants and water to enhance and define spaces, and habitats for insects, birds and animals in the urban context, because otherwise the children don't see the flora and fauna too much. So maybe they can be a bird bath, or they can be a small enclosure, an aviary. So children naturally move throughout the available space and learn through daily activities that provide opportunities to use their bodies in a wide variety of muscle experience. So they learn to jump, then they learn to jump more, and they learn to jump higher. So these are called muscle experiences. They are building their muscles and they need the space to do it. So to make it a kind of a specific list, we need natural lighting, natural materials, space for movement, places to rest, small volumes, because of the anthropometrics, the children are small and they should not be put into large volume spaces unless they are outdoor spaces. And proximities, because children can't walk and reach long distance. Simple color palettes, color coding, so that when you know it's blue it's a toilet, when it's red it's something, so coding. Anthropometrics in terms of low furniture, low window sills so that you can look out. Texture, soft landscape, low steps and treads and so on. So just to give you some visuals of child-friendly spaces. So this is a kitchen on one side and something else on storage on the other side, and the child is sitting and watching the parent in the kitchen. And this is also a study cum kitchen kind of an arrangement. The child is studying in the presence of the parent, doing the homework. The role of natural light. So the child wants to read, there is a big ledge and you can sit beside the window, look at the plant and read. And of course, we should provide space for growth because the child is growing. So you can see the height specified and the child is taller than that. So children, as they grow, the design has to adapt. The key principle is of course that play is the natural behavior of children. So one should always know that children are there to play. So without play there is no childhood basically. Childhood is the most important learning environment. I mean, play is the most important learning environment. People can do without schooling, but people can't do without play. So just to give you some visuals of interestingly designed play spaces. So there's a watch here and some animal figures, slides, climbing equipment and so on. And also it's always good to leave everything, not too customized, so that the children can themselves do something extra, like some tires have been hung up here to play with. This is basically a train, tilted train carriages, just to show the sense of balance, things like that. So you can slide down and some changes there. So you can climb up and you can walk on the rope bridge, and you can see there's a kind of a dynamic play over here. Little safe, a little unsafe. There's sand at the bottom. There are kids right on top. So it's a challenge how far you can climb and things like that. This is a street side play where the shopkeepers are looking at the kids and they're playing on the pavement. So sensory experiences become a part of learning. So it's not just that play is just play. Play is a very useful tool in learning. So here you have some textures and colors. Here somebody is playing with water and how it flows down, and they're trying to increase the rate of flow with the bucket. So there's some experimentation, group activity. This is very interesting. Someone is shouting at one end and the other person is listening at the other end. So these kind of tools for play. So it's not just you have some lawn and say go play. There are some tools for play. And this is quiet indoor play with just a flat surface. And some more bubbles and tree stumps and a place to draw. So we must strive to achieve safety and security and be supportive and also stimulating. There must be neighborliness and there must be also privacy. One should not be really observing the child too much. And there should be an efficient support system for the safety of children after emergencies. If there is a fall or there is something, you need to respond also. And create an environment for children to protect them from violence, exploitation and abuse. There's always a fear that if the child is playing in the playground, then there might be someone who will abuse the child or steal the child. So those kind of fears, the design should take care. A quality living environment at densities higher than conventional detached housing. Of course, now density is a very common issue. In fact, I have been discussing with many people about this fallacy that BDA has gone into of providing 30, 40 as a site size. The unimaginable sprawl that is created by having all these chota sites. And actually they went one step further, and for some time they even had 20, 30 sites. It's really crazy. And now I think they have understood that that's not the way to go. And either you provide a proper site or you provide a group housing. So there's a little bit of rethink on that. So density is higher. So when density is higher, what do we do? If we are in a 7th floor or a 15th floor flat, how do we monitor the child? So there has to be communal storage space in terms of where we put the trolleys and things, and play areas. And if possible, if the families with children can be on the lower floors, and people who don't need to monitor the children playing, they can be on the higher floors. Some things like that. And developments should be located within half a mile of schools, daycare centers, grocery schools, and have, if possible, safe walking routes. I think in Bangalore that's really impossible, but we can always try. In this area of child-friendly housing or family-friendly housing, City of Vancouver has some very good policies. And since 1990, when they implemented these policies, actually in these cities what happens is the adults who work full-time, they live in the downtown, what we call the city center or the CBD. And when people have children, they move away to the suburbs where they get the bigger plot and the house with a garage and a yard and a place to play. So that is called flight, city center flight, and it really doesn't help because it adds to the city sprawling. You have to provide more roads and more services, and it's a drain on the city's finances. So therefore, Vancouver also is a cold city. So their energy bills were rising, so they thought they should compact the city and not make it sprawl like American cities. American cities simply sprawl. So Vancouver was concerned about their energy and they thought they should make the city compact. And therefore they adopted these housing policies and they saw the difference between 2001 and 11 where more families with children came back to the downtown. Now why people don't live in downtown? Because there is less security, there is less open space, there is more congestion, it is more commercial, more vehicles, more parking. So they did look at policies which said you have to provide socializing opportunities for all age groups and enough family units to give children peers to play with. So you have one kind of housing where all the families with children are together and the children will have company to play with. And play space for preschool ages, elementary school and teenage kids in terms of space for board games. So this is an interesting visual. You can see how the child is supported while trying to read. And the city called Wauban in Germany is also having a focus on safe, pedestrian-friendly streets and multifunctional green space and eco principles. That's a spelling mistake. And of course, all design is led by the Nordic countries, where they have called it the century of the child. And right from 1900, they have had child-focused design. So this is really the ultimate. Yeah. Thank you all for a patient hearing.
Is giving licenses for the schools still?
No, actually I have something from the reverse end to court. In the place where in the locality where I stay, there was a corporation school. So you know corporation schools don't function, there are no teachers, no students, something like that, but they had a playground. So there was a corporation school with a small 1.5 room and a broken down toilet and there was a playground. So children of the locality would be playing in that playground. Then suddenly one day we found, somebody digging a borewell and some construction activity started and the place became an apartment through illegal sale through the corporator who sold the school playground to a private party and it became a private apartment. So no amount of PIL, putting petitions and nothing, nobody was willing to hear. This building has now been in existence for about 9 years. So because we were there seeing it right in front of our eyes, we put up the case, but I think BBMP is not concerned. And as you know, all records can be manipulated, so they took that particular corporation school off the list. So neither the teacher nor the school exist anymore, so there is no room for complaint also. So I don't think in India basically, all verticals like the education vertical, the playgrounds vertical, the planning vertical, they all function in their own silos. So, if you ask BBMP, what about playgrounds for the children who come back from school, they will say, ask NCERT. That's it. There is no mesh, absolutely.
So do you think any policies could bring in,
I think it takes time, but I am hopeful because nowadays we do have RTI and we do have, I think, people. There is a reverse trend if you've seen. Previously people who were fed up with the Indian conditions would go abroad. Now people who went abroad are wanting to come back and contribute. And they are more exposed, and people in India also travel so much now. So everyone knows how the world is developing. And we also pay our taxes. And after Modi we pay our taxes more. So with all that, where is the money going? I think people have started to question and query. So something might happen.
When we are talking about the sense of permanence in mitigation camps and disaster relief camps and all that. So, what kind of organizations do we have who oversee that these things are put in place?
Basically, we also go back to UNICEF when we have disasters. UNICEF responds immediately with a disaster management team, and they focus on the children, rehabilitating the children.
Through India?
Through it, yeah. In India also. It happened in Uttarakhand, it happened when the tsunami hit Tamil Nadu. Now I don't know what's happening in Kerala, but they do respond.
But special needs of children are taken care of.
Yes.